اللهم صل. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في القرآن المجيد والفرقان الحميد بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن تعذبهم فإنهم عبادك وإن تغفر لهم فإنك أنت العزيز الحكيم. Respected brothers and elders, mothers and sisters in Islam, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep us in the company of the righteous in this world. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raise us amongst the righteous on the day of Qiyamah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala fill our lives with mercy and rahmah, as all of us are in the need of the rahmah and the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we begin the 7th day of our fast today. SubhanAllah, it's almost been a week since Ramadan started. And as the signs of the words of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam remind us that near the day of judgment, the time will pass very quickly. The years will feel like months, and months will feel like weeks, and weeks will feel like days, and days will just become hours in front of us. So may Allah give us the ability to really benefit from the remaining days of the month of Ramadan. So from the 7th juz of the Quran, or from the 7th sipara, there's this one ayat of the Quran that I want to share a quick reflection upon. This is the end of Surah Al-Ma'idah, and this is almost the third last ayat, verse number 118, chapter number 5, Surah Al-Ma'idah, and Sipara, or juz number 7. Juz number 7 itself starts with the continuation of Surah Al-Ma'idah. It ends there, and then Surah Al-An'am begins, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins to mention many of His blessings, of course, many of the bounties and blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this ayat of the Quran that I recited in front of you is verse number 118. The context of this ayat of the Quran is related to a dua and supplication that Prophet Isa alayhi salam, Jesus, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, made for his disciples. And as we know that the word Al-Ma'idah actually comes from a story and incident that took place within this entire surah itself. That the disciples, or the close chosen friends or individuals, the close circle of Isa alayhi salam, had requested a direct sign of Allah, saying that in order for us to believe in something that there exists a deity above and beyond, then provide us with ma'idatan min as-sama, provide us with a setting of a cloth that is filled with luxurious foods from the heavens directly, that provides and feeds us. So it is mentioned that Isa alayhi salam asked for this, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directly mentioned that after seeing my visible signs, if the people don't accept this, then be ready to accept a punishment that no one has ever seen. Meaning, when you see it with your own eyes and still don't believe it, then you deserve the most wrath itself. And that's why the famous hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which mentions that when the sun would rise from the west near the day of judgment, then after that day there is no more tawbah, there is no more acceptance of forgiveness. Why? Because a person has seen the ghaib, the unseen, with their own eyes. And that's why the yaqeen and the belief in Islam, which is the unseen, is so important and so valuable. But in any case, after the ma'idah, or that cloth or that table which was filled with food, was brought, Isa alayhi salam made a dua. And he said to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he said, In tu'adhibhum fa innahum ibaduk. And subhanAllah, this is so amazing. He said, Oh Allah, if you punish these people, meaning my disciples, fa innahum ibaduk, then indeed they are your servants. In tu'adhibhum, oh Allah, if you were to give them adab and punishments, fa innahum ibaduk, they are your servants, Ya Allah. We can't do much, we are your servants. وَإِن تَغْفِرْ لَهُمْ, and oh Allah, if you were to forgive these servants of yours, فَإِنَّكَ أَنْتَ الْعَزِيزُ الْحَكِيمُ, then there is no one to ever question you and ask you for your majesty. Oh Allah, we're sinful, we're weak. If you were to punish us, then we have nothing to question back. This is your majesty and your greatness. And if you were to forgive us, then there is no one to hold you accountable or ask you for your forgiveness. Now this is the dua that Isa alayhi salam made for his people. But I want to reflect this from the seerah of Rasulullah for something important, and I'll finish with that. It is mentioned in the books of hadith that when Rasulullah became extremely sick, it was prior to the demise of the passing away of the Nabi of Allah that he was in the house of al-Mu'mineen, the mother of the believers, Aisha radiallahu anha. And Aisha radiallahu anha's house was connected directly to the masjid. For those who have been to Medina, may Allah invite us towards Makkah and Medina with khair and afiyah. The house of al-Mu'mineen, the mother of the believers, Aisha radiallahu anha, was directly connected to the masjid itself, where the Prophet ﷺ is currently buried. So at this moment, Rasulullah ﷺ had a window, a cloth that he removed from that house so he can visibly see his Sahaba, his companions in the masjid. And the Nabi of Allah ﷺ said, remove the curtain, I want to see my Sahaba. So he began to see the Sahaba. They were all over the place. They were wandering, they were crying, they were weeping, they were worried, because it was a very difficult moment for them to hear that the Nabi of Allah ﷺ is not feeling well. He went to pray, then the Nabi of Allah ﷺ came back, and those last few moments of the Nabi of Allah ﷺ's life, it is mentioned in the books of hadith that the Nabi of Allah ﷺ was lying down, and Ibn Kathir rahmatullah alayhi mentions that he would take his hand and he would put it in cold water, and he would take his hand out and he would wipe his forehead, and he would say, "Oh Allah, make the last moments of death easy for me." And this is the words of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He would take water and he would wipe it over his head, and he would say, "Oh Allah, make these last moments easy for me." Then the Sahaba said, the Nabi of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam closed his eyes, and the Nabi of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam recited a dua that Ibrahim alayhi salam made for his nation, for his ummah, because every Nabi made some dua for his people. Then he became quiet. Then the hadith mentions that Rasulullah ﷺ recited this ayat of the Quran prior to his demise. Rasulullah ﷺ said, "In tu'adhibhum fa innahum ibaduk." He looked at his Sahaba and he's remembering the words of Isa alayhi salam. "Oh Allah, if you give them adab, then they are your servants. And oh Allah, if you were to forgive these people, then no one can ever hold you accountable." Then the Sahaba said he became quiet. And then we began to see Rasulullah ﷺ cry before the last moments of his life. And then they say we became worried that what is making the Nabi of Allah ﷺ cry? So the Sahaba said we went close to the Nabi of Allah ﷺ and we saw his lips move. And the Nabi of Allah ﷺ was saying, "Ummati, ummati, ummati, ummati." Oh Allah, my people. Oh Allah, my nation. Oh Allah, my nation. He remembered the dua of Ibrahim alayhi salam for his people. He remembered the dua of Isa alayhi salam for his people. And then the Nabi of Allah prior to his demise is saying, "Oh Allah, my ummah, oh Allah, my ummah." And according to one hadith, it is mentioned that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent angel Jibreel alayhi salam and said, "O Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we will not leave your ummah alone till the day of Qiyamah." Meaning that your ummah will not be left alone. Meaning the rahmah of Allah will be upon your ummah. And then the hadith mentions that Rasulullah ﷺ gave few more advices where he said, "As-salah, as-salah, wa ma malakat ayman." My Sahaba, namaz, salah, 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 and be careful for who Allah has made you responsible. And according to the hadith, the last words, and then of course Rasulullah ﷺ, his head was in the lap of al-Mu'mineen Aisha radiallahu anha. He saw Abdurrahman and he said, he looked at his miswak that he had, so he pointed towards the miswak. So Aisha radiallahu anha said that I thought that he likes using the miswak. So I called my brother, I said, "Give me that miswak." She said, "I took that miswak and I chewed it and I made it very, very soft." And the Nabi of Allah used the miswak right before his demise. And the last words, according to the hadith, Rasulullah said, "Allahumma ar-rafiq al-a'la." Oh my Allah, the greatest of my companions and friends. Rafiq means the closest of allies, the closest of relationships. Allahumma rafiq al-a'la. My closest of rafiq, my closest of interactions, my closest of acquaintances, my closest of connection. Oh my Allah, and the Nabi of Allah ﷺ left the face of this earth. A reminder for all of us, brothers and elders, brothers and sisters in Islam, this is the 7th juz of the Quran. This is surah number 5, surah Ma'idah, verse number 118. This is the dua of Isa alayhi salam for his ummah, where he cried and he prayed for his ummah. The same aspect was the dua of Rasulullah ﷺ for all of us. As an ummah, he prayed for all of us. Two important things before I finish. Number one, brothers and sisters, please learn to pray for one another. Pray for each other. For indeed, the dua that we make for one another, Allah accepts this for our behalf as well. It's impossible that you ask for comfort for your brothers and sisters and Allah doesn't give you comfort and ease, right? Don't become stingy in our du'as. Be generous in your du'a, as the treasures of Allah are so generous. Ask for one another. Allah will never deprive of you for your goodness. That's number one. Number two, there is a lot of haqq of the Nabi of Allah ﷺ in our lives. He prayed for us. He cried for us. He went through so much struggle and difficulty for us. Learn, honor, and practice the life of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. True love is not just the words that I love the Prophet of Allah. Bring the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Love the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Practice the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Love the sunnah more than anything in your life. Practice the sunnah in your life. Bring sunnah in your homes, in your lives, in your communities, in your children, in your spouses, because there is nothing greater than bringing that beloved sunnah into our lives. May Allah give us tawfiq and ability to practice whatever good has been shared, inshallah. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanaka wa bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha